All right. Live in one, two, three destinations. And here we go. Perfect. All right. As we get the last bit of this together, I'm going to go ahead and read this intro. So first and foremost, good evening, everybody. I hope that your Monday went well and that you are in and settled for the night. And let's see if we can have a great session for real estate after dark. I was approached by someone, I guess it was a few years ago, named Courtney, and they have a weekly radio show that they're on. They're really ingrained in South Louisiana and East Mississippi real estate, but they also travel all over. And we started working together with this meetup on Clubhouse. I don't know if you've ever used Clubhouse or not, but it was a really cool platform to where you could get on there and it was just audio, and we would kind of hang out about once a week. She had somebody from the Southwest Louisiana, somebody from Southeast Louisiana, and I kind of covered North Louisiana. So we would just kind of chop it up and we would talk about our markets. Where are they? What deals are we seeing? What are some of the best practices that we saw and what was working? And more importantly, what wasn't working? And I've got to say, just over the years, watching Courtney go from already being successful to growing even more and doing the things that she's doing, which I'm not going to go into all the details on that. I'm going to let her tell you about what she does and how she does it because, quite frankly, it's just really interesting. And she's also been one of the people that is in the creative space that isn't um, isn't just smoke and mirrors. I want you to understand that there's a lot of gatekeeping in that space. And that's not really Courtney's style. So, with that being said, I'm going to bring her up and we're going to go in, and she actually has a presentation. So, this is going to be a little bit different than just the conversational back and forth that we do. However, I still welcome you. If you have questions, comments, please put them into the chat. If it's on Facebook Live, drop a comment. If it's on Instagram, drop a comment. It should come in to this stream so we can see it. So, without more and more just deliberation, not deliberation, but delay, yeah, I'm going to bring Courtney up right now. And actually, so we're going to unmute her mic so that she can come to the stage and share her investment strategy. Courtney, hello.
What up, my friend? It's
How
always
are
good to
you?
see you. Look, man, I'm doing good.
Good. Yeah, I know that it just going back and kind of revisiting where we kind of met and how it's grown and where we're at. We actually didn't even meet until last year for the first time.
Yeah,
And yeah, it was just really great to actually see you in person and see you in the rooms that I like to be in. And I'll let you talk about that event if you decide that you'd like to share about it. But I've got to say that it's powerful and it's great to actually see what you've done firsthand. So with that, I'm just going to kind of take that step back and I'm just going to kind of monitor. And if there are questions or comments or anything like that, I'll just try to jump in. But I'd like for you to have plenty of time to go through the presentation and the information that you'd like to share with people tonight, and then we're going to have a Q&A and maybe a little conversation if that's all right with you.
I'm down for it all, man. Well, look,
All right.
thank you so much for having me, first of all. Like,
Yeah.
truly, I enjoy talking shop. And you and I have been friends, Catherine as well, friends for years. And
Yeah.
maybe more online than in person because people don't realize how big Louisiana is. Um, they're like, oh, yeah, your friends in Shreveport that are, yeah. I'm like, okay, but that's 6 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so anybody outside of Louisiana, we
Your
eat
neighbors.
beignets and we ride alligators to school. You know.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, I'm looking forward to sharing tonight. Just holler at me if there's any. I'm presuming I'm be able to see the comments on the side,
Yes.
potentially.
Yeah. You should be able to see the comments, and then I'll also jump in just in case.
Yeah, that sounds good. Look, I'll go ahead and pull it up.
All right. I'm going to
All
mute
right.
my mic so I don't just jump in and like cut you off.
All right. Well, cool. Guys, I'm gonna go ahead. I want to jump on and kind of talk about creative financing. One of my preliminary beliefs around creative financing is that it's Pandora's box. So I'm going to do my best to stay kind of high level tonight, uh, as an introduction to creative finance. Know that I'm going to constantly feel a pull toward the depth. I'm going to do my best to stay away from that and say no. So just a quick introduction, as he shared. The top left, I have the privilege of being on the radio every weekend in New Orleans and have been on for years. Very far right, that is a photo. My baby face. I've been in the business for 10 years. And my first purchase was a short sale where we had to negotiate with the bank to stop a foreclosure. I don't know how to do anything the easy way. So a few other things, I started a meetup in my area. I no longer run it, but I ran it for 6 years. It's still actively going in the suburbs of New Orleans. I am based out of New Orleans. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to go ahead and just jump into what you guys are here for tonight, which is to learn the goods. So we're going to talk about, I want to give you some definitions for creative financing, because I know that a lot of people talk about it, but some people say, I don't really understand what it is. I am going to share with you some resources. And then I also am going to share with you 2 case studies. And but before we do any of that, let's go ahead and see who here is in the room today. If you have bought or sold some real estate with creative financing, put a 1 if it's a yes, you have, or put a 2 if it is a no. And if you don't mind letting me know what you see, Lee, I'm wondering if that's presenter view where it allows me to see the comments.
That was me. I'm a 1.
Yeah, sweet. Awesome. This is going to help me kind of get an idea of when to go deeper, but when to also, keep it high level. So let's go ahead from there. So let's jump off with this is not from some like technical dictionary. This is my definition. It's, what is creative financing? It is utilizing non-traditional financing options and really methods such as making payments to the seller or taking over the payments on their loan. It can include so many more things than that. And that's really where it's like Pandora's box. There's a lot that we could potentially get into. Again, I'm going to kind of keep it preliminary tonight, but I'm open to any and all questions, throughout the talk. Specifically, for sure, it sounds like at the end. But let's kind of talk through the benefits of creative financing. Sometimes people say, Courtney, that sounds complicated, or or why would anyone ever want to do creative financing type deals? So one of the first benefits is that, you really get to leave the institutions behind. And what I mean by that, like the traditional bank, which is if you're going to get a loan through them to fund a real estate deal, they are going to, want to see everything from your credit score to your W-2 paperwork to your tax returns. They're going to analyze, everything in your life to try to understand, if you fit into their box. And although that has its place in the industry, a huge thing there is that you want to keep in mind that there's can you see that, Lee?
No.
Is it not sharing? It gave me a reload.
Okay. Yeah. Try to reload right quick, and I'm just kind of hanging out, holding it open for you. There we go. Adding it to the stage. There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Hey, you gotta love live streams, man.
You gotta love it. All right, can you see that?
Yeah, you're in audience window right now, so you just need to enter full screen mode, and you should be able to go.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so you're in the presenter, so it's going to show your notes over here, but you can try
Yeah,
your
thank
other.
you.
Yeah.
Gotta love that. Let's do this. I don't know why it said that, but this is why no one wants me to do wants me to do tech stuff because I can get this stuff going. Just don't make me do it. Understand why it's doing that.
Oh, there you go. Looks like you're back in action.
Sweet. All right. So back to leaving the institutions behind. Again, they have their place in the industry, but we all know that they're rigid. More than that, with them being rigid, they're often not fast, and there's plenty of good borrowers that get left behind because they don't fit into the perfect mold that banks have. And so, they're going to look at, a lot of different things. Again, I understand they have their place in the industry, but with creative financing, all sellers are now a possible source of financing for me and a source of funding for a deal for me. And so that becomes very powerful. Over the years, I've done a few hundred deals, and ultimately, if all you went was the traditional route, it's hard to scale. And so you do have to start looking at different, funding options over time. So let's talk about another benefit of creative financing. Right now, a lot of folks, they see the 7, 8, 9% interest rates, and it's stressing them out. It's causing a lot of investors to get stuck. They're stuck because they're having a hard time making deals work, because it's hard to get a seller or the sellers in the marketplace to come down from that 7, 8, or from their current asking price enough to where you can make a 7, 8, or 9% interest rate work. There's this lack of equilibrium in the marketplace right now. Sellers are still asking too much, but the interest rates are so high, as well as things like property taxes and insurance and all of those things. So a lot of investors are sitting on the sidelines right now because they're like, I can't make a deal make sense. I'm going to show you some case studies of how I've made deals make sense, and you can kind of see some of those benefits at play. But with creative financing, all the terms of the financing terms of a deal, they're negotiable. And one of the biggest parts that includes is interest rate. I've done everything from 0% interest to, very frequently 4, 5, 6% interest. But one of the big things is that ultimately, it's almost like what's going on in the market doesn't exactly matter. It's what can you negotiate between the two parties. And so while so many investors are stuck right now, I've been able to really manipulate the marketplace by manipulating the interest rate with creative deal structuring. And another benefit is it's not just interest rates that I can manipulate, it's other terms, like, for example, things like your down payment, the length of, the financing. And, plenty of times I am getting long-term 30-year financing from sellers. I mean, I'm going to share with you a case study of one where I got 30-year seller finance terms from a seller who was 63 years old when we struck that deal. 30 years, no balloon, meaning we're going to ride that full 30 years out, and I plan to give her last payment at 93. And so that is something is super powerful, and so really all of those things are up for negotiation. There's a lot of other benefits to creative financing. Those are just 3 that I wanted to kind of harp on. Lee, are you seeing a lot of people feel stuck right now because of interest rates?
Not only with the retail side of things, but also we're seeing a lot of investors that they just complain that there's no deals. And my thing, right? So I've always said, if you can control price or terms, then you can make the deal. And I think that you really leaned into the aspect of controlling the terms, whenever
Yeah.
they are fixed on the price. So yeah.
Yeah, it's important to keep in mind that deals are not found, they're created. Because if the deal had a glaring sign that said, this is a great, seller finance deal, do this deal or I will, they don't exist like that. And so it's really you've got to have the eyes to see the ingredients that are lining up, and say, hey, this has all the makings of a good, creative deal. Let me see if, all parties are willing to play ball. And again, so deals are not found, they're created. It's more so I'm finding, certain sellers in the marketplace who needs the solution that a creative deal provides. So speaking of the solution that a creative deal provides, it's important to keep in mind that I see the different tools in my tool belt as really just that, tools in a tool belt, where I am, my goal as an investor is to have more tools, because the more tools I have, the more people I can help. For example, if the only tool in your tool belt was a hammer and you showed up, to do a construction job, well, the hammer can do some things, but you're going to be limited. So the power of it is when you have more tools, sure, that hammer can do some things, but when it comes to plumbing, you're just going to cause damage, right? Or you're not going to be able to deal with it, right? Same thing with, electrical or, whatever, because the reality is that yes, a hammer is effective, but it's only effective in the situations where a hammer is needed. And so the same thing with a low cash offer. There's so many sellers that low cash offer is either not attractive nor can it help them. And so by having other tools in my tool belt, again, I can, in essence, create more opportunities for deals. Something that's important to keep in mind is that there's a plethora of different types of deal strategies. And that ultimately, it's important for you to start your journey of learning these different deal strategies and knowing when to use which one with which seller. So, for example, I've got on here basically a chart. And in this chart, I've got basically different creative deal structures. And this is not an exhaustive list by far. It's going to be some names you maybe have heard of. And it's important to know, for example, so the first line, seller financing, owner financing, seller carryback, purchase money note. This is all a common language for a traditional owner finance deal. And so you're saying, okay, Courtney, what is that? It's where the title transfers from the seller to me, my entity, my trust, whatever. And basically, we negotiate the terms of the sale and I make them payments over time. So that is a traditional owner financing deal. So it's important to note that the title transferred. It's no longer with the seller. It is now with me. I am the owner of that property. The second strategy, in Louisiana, we call it a bond for deed, but other states call it contract for deed or land contract. It's where there is an agreement lined out between the seller and myself that I am going to make payments that look like XYZ, this much down, this much a month, and this much over this amount of period of time, fill in the blank for all of those. But the title stays with the seller and it only transfers to me at an agreed upon point. Maybe it's when I make all the payments. Maybe it's after a year of me making all the payments, showing them that, I'm trustworthy. That's important because, for example, if you're going to make payments on a property, but let's just say it's fully gutted, would you feel comfortable renovating a property if it was fully gutted if you didn't have the title?
No, I wouldn't want to invest that money.
Right. And then here's the other thing. If you need, for example, a private money loan to fund the renovation, you need title to be able to do that. And so it's important to understand with creative financing, basically there's different terms which mean different things. And so I'm going to encourage you, if you're wanting to do creative deals, start the journey by getting around other creative investors to start to learn the language and really start to learn the different strategies. To continue on with this, This is probably one of the more popular ones right now, which is subject to the existing loan. Buying something subject to the existing loan, traditionally, the title is going to transfer from the seller to me. And the big issue there is that it is not clear title. The seller has a loan, let's just say to Chase Bank. And that loan, let's just say it's a 3% loan. Beautiful, right? So I am buying that property with the disclaimer that it is subject to that existing loan staying in place. And that loan is tied to the seller, tied to their credit, and they've got the relationship with Chase Bank. The seller and I, the property, the title to the property transfers to my name. But I never enter into a formal relationship with Chase Bank. I might have paperwork that allows me to talk to Chase and things like that. But my relationship is always between me and the seller. And the seller is the one that has the formal relationship with the bank. So that's important to keep in mind, that when you're talking with the seller, that there may come a time where you're like, you've got to address that, for example, they have a loan, and that has to be, structured in the deal so that you know how to tackle that. Lastly, you've got lease options, master lease options, pure options. And a lot of these are different strategies where the title doesn't transfer, but you can control the property. You can control the use of the property. You can also control the growth of a property. And so without jumping too much into these, for example, a master lease option is where I would have the right to rent a property from a seller, so a lease, but the master lease part allows me to sublet. So a YouTube word for that would be rental arbitrage. I'm going to go rent from the seller at 1,000 with the right to sublet, and I might be able to rent it for 1,400 and make a spread there. The option part of that is that I can actually put an option fee up front and basically say, hey, I want the right to be able to buy it at today's price sometime in the next 5 years. And so
just to jump in on that, Courtney, this is the master lease option for anybody that's watching or watches the replay. A lot of people that are doing Airbnb rental arbitrage. That's the buzzword that's been going around. To where they'll go and they'll arrange the master lease with an option, but then they'll go and spend like $6,000 to $10,000 on furnishings. That way, they're in the property for a minimal amount. And they put it on Airbnb, and then they lease it out. And that landlord is getting their monthly rent. They're happy for that. And many times, these master lease investors, they'll actually go out there and they'll say, look, we'll actually even maintain the property for you. So those are just some of the ways that this creativity helps to get investors a low leverage point into starting into real estate investing. Just wanted to add that in. Sorry to cut you off.
No, absolutely. And I think that's great because in the most common way to use it is that's most talked about is that model. But fun fact, this week on my podcast, the Strategic Success Podcast, I actually am dropping an episode this coming week on the best use for a master lease option. And it is not Airbnb.
What? All right.
And a lot of people, they go to the Airbnb model, but how many people are struggling with Airbnb right now because of regulation, occupancy isn't, and things like that. And so I'm looking forward to having that conversation out there. It just goes to show that, like, really, you can overcome a lot of things and you can control a property and maybe not own it, right? And there's a lot of ways that you can benefit and be able to start your journey. I'm a firm believer that the deals you do are a direct reflection of, number one, your mindset, like what you believe is possible, what you know to be possible. And then second of all, your skill set, what you can make happen. And there is so many times in my last 10 years of investing that I realized that I had to expand my mindset and grow my skill set because I wanted to do more, for example, I wanted to start doing creative deals back in the day. I wanted to start, basically I wanted to grow past my current level. And so keep that in mind, you guys, that like if you're wanting to grow, you may have to, number one, conquer the mindset part, but then you also need to welcome in the skill set part where you actually know how to turn information into like instruction and implementation. So super important.
No, thank you for sharing that. And real brief side note, please plug that podcast if it's not listed at your website. Plug that for later and what day it's going to drop so we can make sure to listen for it.
Yeah, if you go to CourtneyFricke.com, literally the Strategic Success Podcast, every Wednesday I drop a full podcast. I'm right now doing something crazy where I'm doing one video a day for the first 100 days of 2025. So there's a lot of micro podcasts happening there, but I digress. So definitely check that out.
All right.
Well, so let's get into. Go ahead.
Real quick, we did have a question. Are you ever worried the bank may call the note due?
Great question. I'm going to do a case study on subject 2, and do you mind if I tackle that then?
Yeah.
Remind me, because I'm going to give a seller finance example, and then I'm going to give a subject 2 example, and I really want to talk about subject 2 deals in that one because I have some very heavy thoughts on it, and by heavy I mean they're like big, and I say them with my chest. In the sense that, because a lot of people almost skirt over some of those things. And so great that you asked that question. Love it. Keep them coming.
All right.
So this is a duplex in New Orleans that I bought. Seller was on the market 70 plus days, was afraid of where the market was going. And she actually reached out to me before listing. She wanted retail. Once I was vacant, I said, look, if you want the top dollar, basically, get someone who's going to house hack, who's going to, on the retail market, live in one side, rent out the other. Yeah. Well, this was end of 2022. So the market started getting wonky and interest rates started going up, things like that. And so she eventually came back to me nervous. So this is the deal that I inked out. So it was on the MLS at 155. I believe it was worth 175, but it did, there was a little bit deferred maintenance. So I do think they were right at not listing at the full 175. They had 2 separate buyers who walked. One of it was that they had a cracked joist underneath the duplex, which I looked underneath there. We haven't even been forced to fix it yet. Well, we did go put a sister board underneath, like next to it. But at some point we will fix it, and it's only going to be like $3,000 to fix it. Like nothing crazy, but it just scared a lot of people. And so again, 2 buyers walked, and this is in, New Orleans East, which it's a part of New Orleans that does get a bad rep. And so at that time she was only getting $700 a month. Let me backtrack. She inherited the property from her dad in 2014. So this was 2022. She was like, Courtney, I'm ready to not be a landlord anymore. I am retired, and these rentals are giving me headaches. I'm like, noted. Okay. So when I walked over there, she was just like, Courtney, she was listed at the 155, 70 plus days. She refused. I said, why don't you just lower the price? She goes, well, I want what I want. She kept saying that. I want what I want. I don't want to drop the price. She owned them free and clear. And I'm just like, okay, you want to get rid of them. You want to get rid of them quickly, but like, you're not willing to drop your price. And so this is where, one of my mentors, Jack Miller, he said, I can only help the greedy and the needy. Somehow she was both, so the reality there is that she was only getting $700 a month because she had, of the 2 units, one of them was vacant and had been vacant for years, but because she did not want the headaches of tenants, she didn't rent it out. And then she, basically the one that was 700, they had been there for 10 years through Section 8, and she'd never gone up on the rent. And so she had gotten some offers below 100. And I said, look, honestly, Miss Karen, this is where my numbers would be. So at the same time, like, she was like, Courtney, please come offer on my property, please. And I'm like, look, I'm probably going to be where those other offers were, under that 100,000. And she was like, I can't take that. Well, I said, well, in the event, listen to what I have to say here, you guys. In the event that I could show you how I could get you that 155, would you be open to hearing what that looks like? She said, absolutely. Come on over. So we met at the property. I spent less than 5 minutes looking at the actual property. I spent the next hour and a half talking to her.
Wow.
Now that's not always great for my cash friends, because that's not something you can scale easily. But truly during that time, we were able to have a conversation, and this is the deal we inked out. I purchased it for $82,000. My principal and interest payment is $440 a month and 19 cents. Now I'm paying for taxes and insurance, but if you think of her $700 a month, when you deduct taxes and insurance, which insurance sucks right now, I really was giving her what she was netting all along, right? Like I'm not too far off of that. I did, in essence, do a $0 down to her, so no down payment, but I had to pay $7,604.40. That I paid for both sides of the closing cost, and I paid for both sides of the real estate commissions on the deal. And so $7,600 is what I came out of pocket. This is a 5% interest, 360 payments, no balloons. She's 63 when we did this deal. And 30 years, no balloon. And she understood that. Every little bit of it. She came back to me with 25 questions. I loved her. She had 25 questions about the deal I proposed. And this is how you said, Courtney, how in the world did you get her to 82 when she wouldn't come a lick off of 155? Well, here's how.
That was my question. Yeah.
I showed her, if you look here, the principal plus interest, if you add those two things together over 30 years, she gets 158. And truly, that's all she wanted to see, that she was getting over 155 and not a penny less. Now, for her, she didn't care if it took time because she didn't want to, quote unquote, settle.
Okay. All right. So you get her with the razzle dazzle. All right. I got you.
And so and here's one of the big things. I said, look, I can get you the 155, but it's going to take me time. Let me show you how, pretty much my offer is going to be in that 80 range, but let me show you how I can double it by paying you interest over time. And she thought through it, and she said, you know what, Courtney, basically when I come and see her now, every Christmas, I bring her a little happy and we sit and talk. She always says, oh, there's my little retirement plan walking in. And because the reality is she was able to get the benefits of rentals without the headaches.
Yeah, exactly. And if I'm getting ahead of your slides here, I would assume that you created a promissory note and a collateral mortgage. She's in first position. So
this is so what happened? Title transferred to in what's called a credit sale. And so a credit sale, it's seller financing. And so she got a credit sale mortgage. And what that is she doesn't become the quote unquote bank. Because let's be honest, if someone is a bank and they're lending, money has to be transferred. Money is not being transferred here, right? Like technically in that sense, right? In the sense of a loan. So what we're doing here is that credit sale outlines the terms of the sale. Basically, my terms of my sale is I'm buying it at $440.19 a month for 360 payments.
There you go.
And so something that's important is absolutely, we had a title company draft this up. A fun fact, she's 63. Some of you are maybe like, maybe she shouldn't even buy green bananas at that point. Like that's kind of harsh. But some people think that, right? Maybe you had the thought like 30 years for someone at that age. In getting to know her, I asked her, I said, I don't need to know what it says, but Miss Karen, do you have a will? And she said, no, I never got around to it. I said, well, how about this? As a part of my offer, I am going to include a simple, setup of your will with, the title company I do business with has a law firm, and their law firm will do it. I don't need to know what's on it. I just need to know the attorney that has the paperwork. So in the
Yeah.
event that you pass away, I know who to send the $440.19 to. So that was a huge opportunity. I was able to protect her and me, right? And she was able, that was a huge benefit for her. And as you see, rents, we have both sides rented out to where Section 8 is. And I told her all these things. I said, why don't you go up on the rent? Courtney, I don't want to deal with it. Why don't you put another tenant in there? I don't want to deal with. Okay, then at a certain point, I'm just going to close my hand because you're putting money in it right now. And she loves the arrangement we have. She inherited some other rentals. And this Christmas, which it was 2 years after our arrangement, she's ready now to start. She started talking with me about her other rentals. And so we're starting to talk through those now, as well as her uncle who has one as well. And so this is an example of a long-term seller finance deal. Some misconceptions are that I was begging her to lend me money because I was broke. In reality, this was a deal that the only way I could make her number make sense, basically give her her retail number, was by spreading it out over time. She was so stuck on the number.
That's one of the things that I love about this case study that you have, is that especially whenever you get down to the lower right hand corner where it says rents now, 2,000 a month, to get a lift from 700 a month to 2,000 a month. Real quick, I'm going to go ahead and say Lindell Procell says hello from Shreveport.
What up, dude?
And I'm going to go ahead and put that comment down so we can see this slide again. Catherine, she says that's awesome. But this is that's a $1,300 increase. Now, was she just grossly under market when you contacted her, and then you just knew what the market rents were? How did you get about to that?
Yeah. So again, she was at $700 a month for one unit on Section 8.
Mm-hmm.
We are currently getting $1,000 per side with Section 8.
Beautiful.
She hadn't changed. She hadn't gone up on rent in 10 years.
Yeah. That's great. All right. I'll stop interrupting so you can continue.
No, you're good. And so what's important here is to keep in mind that, number one, when it comes to creative, again, this was not a deal on the, at 155, just like with a red glaring sign saying, will seller finance for 30 years. Like, it's rarely that. It was, again, all the ingredients. She didn't want to come off her price, but she wanted, which is the market was telling her. Investors wanted to pay around $80,000. But I said, well, look, I have an additional tool in my tool belt, which is basically I can include interest with that principal. Fun fact, she would have done $155,000 at 0% interest, and I said no. Any thought as to why I said no? Because in order for a deal to progress, basically there needs to be a level that both parties are in agreement. I wasn't in agreement at that point. Any thoughts as to why I was not in agreement at 155,000 at 0%?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and see if anybody else does this before I jump in, but see if any of the comments comes out. So we'll give it just a little bit lower. And okay, they messed up. So I'm really trying to scratch my head on that, because you said no, and you would have actually saved, or well, the payments would have been close to the same, wouldn't it? I mean,
it would have been close to the same. And well, look, I'll tell you what they were. So 155 divided by 360 would have been 430. Actually, would have been cheaper.
Yeah, you'd have saved $100 a year. So, all right.
So here's why I said no. Although I have done plenty of 0% seller finance deals, and I actually like to share this case study for multiple reasons. I could have shared one that I did, I've already done a handful of deals this year, but I like sharing this one for a few different reasons. One, it's this idea that I said no to 0% because people don't realize that 0%, although it sounds sexy, as an operator, as someone who does the day-to-day of this business, that is not always beneficial. Let me break it down. First of all, she one of the biggest things is this is a rental for me. And I went and looked at what the property was currently assessed at with the tax assessor. It was
Mhm.
assessed at $76,000. If I would have done 155,000 as my purchase price, even at 0% interest, there would have been a level that the property taxes would have almost doubled, if not doubled. And so that impacted my cash flow.
No, yeah, that's absolutely great. Yeah, just the property tax spent on that. That's sharp.
And so the tax assessor isn't smart enough to take principal and add interest and think of that as a purchase price,
No, they're
as your
not.
total,
Yeah,
right? And so they're just going to see the 82, right? If you live in states like Florida, you guys have doc stamps. That would have
yeah,
mattered here, right?
yeah.
Here's the other
No, I
thing.
mean, biggest takeaway of the night for me right there so far.
Well, and so but people don't think, they just go for, what they think is a home run
Yeah,
at
yeah,
0%, but that's because people don't ever talk about the deal after the deal. The life after the deal.
yeah. No,
And
you had. I was right there. Like, why didn't you go zero? So yeah,
exactly. And so the other thing is, so she originally contacted me beforehand. She then hired an agent. I'll be honest, I love working with real estate agents, but this agent tried killing this deal at no less than a dozen times with us involved. And so there's a level there. If I bought it at 155 and 0% interest, ultimately because I paid like no down payment, I paid for all the costs, the closing costs and the commissions for both sides. If I would have done 155 at 0%, I would have been paying for commissions for both sides on 155. So instead, I paid the closing cost and the commissions for 82,000 on both sides.
yeah. No, that's great.
I have no problem paying commissions, but for this deal, it didn't make sense. Those were multiple factors involved.
Yeah.
Sweet.
All
You ready
right.
for me to go on to the next one?
Well, I do have a quick question. So,
Yep.
Catherine asks, so God forbid, what if something happened to you before that 30 years? Would the property just go back to her? Or do you have a instruction set up?
Great question. By the way, I actually was doing some more estate planning today with my attorney. And so this is really important that I do have a level where I am basically my business is set up. I technically own this one with the business partner. And so we would both have to be killed for this to be like, go to the next level of things being a problem. But we actually, the way we set up our business is that we have a debt service bank account that we like to keep stocked, ideally at 3 months per property of paying of the
Yeah.
monthly mortgage payments. So number one, we have reserves. Number two, we have estate planning done. So in the event that we both got hit with the proverbial bus, there's some actions that would be taken. But here's the thing: it would not just go back to her, because basically the asset is now in my company's name. Her asset is the payment stream. It's called a note, right?
Mhm.
And so she gets that asset. She can sell it. Someone can inherit it from her. In the same way, my heirs have an asset that they can sell or they can inherit, right?
Yeah.
And keep operating and keep receiving as planned. And so, great question. So this is
Okay.
a
I'll stop interrupting. Go ahead.
no, you're
Till the
good.
next.
This is a seller finance example. I want to kind of move along. I know we're kind of stretching it out here some, but I have one more case study. So this is a subject to the loan example. So definitely, it took me a while, and then I realized that I actually have foreclosure spelled wrong on there, and that's even on my socials and stuff.
Mhm.
But this is a property that I bought subject to the loan, and I've bought a lot of properties subject to the loan as well as with seller financing. But again, this is one I like to share for a number of reasons. So let's dive into it. All right, this is a property that it was on the MLS at 204,000. It was a dead end street. And everything on the street, let's just say there's 30 houses. This is a 2010 build house. There were about 10 lots that were being built on all at the same time by a large builder. And so this was in 2023. Again, the market has shifted, and this agent is trying to help this seller sell a 2010 and then competing against 10 2023 builds. And so not only are they going to struggle to sell, but they were facing foreclosure. And I've stopped foreclosures for the last 10 years. It's one of my biggest specialties. And so one of the biggest things here is that agent called me and said, I think I have a Courtney deal. And I love when they do that because then the agent understands what I'm looking for. So ultimately, it was hard to say what the ARV was because, you can't really compare a 2010 with a 2023, new construction. But we were confident at 204. At that time, I said, look, I can't pay you what you owe. At that point, she owed $178,000. And so I was like, I can't pay cash. My cash offer is less than what you owe. And listen to me here, guys, in the event that I could take over making the payments for you on your loan as soon as maybe next month, would you be open to considering what that looks like? It would have to include me catching up the loan because obviously they're behind, but would you be open to that? And they said, yeah, we're really, we're open to anything at this point. So ultimately I proposed a plan where I would buy the property subject to the loan that's in their name with a bank. They qualify for that loan, by the way. And they got that loan, made one payment on it and never paid on it again. And so I had to bring at least 21,000 of it was to catch up payments during that they didn't make payments pretty much all throughout COVID. And so
they were 21K in arrears. Okay.
Yeah. So I brought out of pocket at closing $28,579.18. That paid for the commissions, closing costs, and 21,000 went to catch up the loan. Because again, if I'm going to take over making the payments, that loan needs to be current and not go into foreclosure.
Yeah.
So you see here, my purchase price was $176,569.18. It was a 3.875% interest rate. Beautiful. Is a 2020 loan, which means that loan was created in 2020. That has importance, and I'll talk to you about that here in a second. I knew if you look on the left side, it says PITI, then the principal, interest, tax, insurance. When I looked at her mortgage statement, she was paying $1,100.90. I knew on my experience with that number would jump to about $1,254.82. Ultimately, it's important that you know how to run the numbers right, because look at where I'm currently paying $1,339.03.
Yeah.
Number one, that is because I did have that projected PITI. It did jump. But then second of all, the insurance crisis is really causing some havoc. Long-term rental wise, place would rent for about $1,500. I currently am renting it as a midterm rental. It's getting around $3,250 a month, plus some gross. That's gross because I have about 500 goes towards utilities, internet, cutting the grass, stuff like that. But here's something really powerful. I bought it in January 2023 at 176. Because of that low interest rate, look at this, 148,000.
Yeah.
It is paying down rapidly because of that low interest rate. So there is power to a low interest rate. Maybe you're saying, Courtney, I don't have 28,000 to bring to the table. Frequently, when I do subject to deals, I will bring on a private money lender who will lend, the 28,000 plus. Maybe I have repairs. I only had to put a fridge in this one, and then furnish it. And at that time, I was moving in with my spouse. And I actually had a whole bunch of furniture brand new in the box, and like a lot of like duplicates in my house. So I said, look, let's just use that.
There
And
you
so
go.
my furnishing was not too crazy. And so this is one of those things where there are options. You could bring on a partner for that 28,000. You can bring on a private money loan and put in second on those. As long as you know how to protect people's money and have conversations, that could be a good fit. I very frequently do that with my subject to deals. But I want to make sure that I'm doing that and keeping everyone as safely involved as possible. I did not bring a private money lender on this deal in the beginning, because if you take the 176 and the 28, it basically equals to $204,000. I don't like bringing on private money with a subject to. Basically, I want the total amount of debt, the first that I'm taking over subject to, the second that I am bringing on from a private money lender, and I want that to be 85% of what the property is worth. I want to do that to keep everyone involved safe and to
Yeah.
not over leverage. So I used my own money on this one. A few years later, after the loan had been paid down, then I took out a $36,000 loan and got my 28 back and some change. So, but I was able to do that and put my private money lender in a safer position. So keep in mind, when you do deals, you want to make sure that you're understanding the risk. Our job as investors is to acknowledge risk, manage risk, and try to do the safest deals possible. It's important to understand that with subject to deals, a lot of people, the 3.875% interest rate sounds really sexy, but the reality is that there are a lot of inherent risk with the subject to deal. I'll be very honest. Subject to is easily the most riskiest deal that I do in all the creative deal structuring. It's one of the most riskiest, both for the seller and myself. And
And
so,
just real quick on that, Courtney, this is, and Lindell is asking, are you taking over the debt or keeping it in the seller's name? So maybe if you
yeah,
could unpack that part
sure.
just briefly again.
Lindell, great question. So to take over the debt and put it into my own name is called an assumption. That is very different than a subject to. An assumption, so if you remember, a subject to is the seller has a loan, let's just say with Chase Bank. And I am, if I'm going to buy a property subject to, the title is going to transfer to me, and I'm going to have an agreement. I'm going to have a relationship with the seller that I'm going to make the payments on their behalf. But I never create a formal relationship with Chase Bank. The only relationship that exists is between the seller and Chase Bank. But with an assumption, it's the seller has a 3.875% loan with Chase, and the loan can be assumed. Then I am going to go qualify for that loan and assume it. And I'm going to create a formal relationship with Chase. I'm going to go bring them all my tax returns, my credit score, all of that. If that loan is assumable, not all loans are assumable, but every single loan could be taken subject to. And so that's something that's important to keep in mind. They are not the same. And that is something that it's really important to understand, because this seller, when I pitch a subject to deal, I go through, I'm like, look, this is an option that I think we should consider. But I'll be very, very honest. Subject to is not the right fit for all sellers. And I'll be honest, it's also not the right fit for all buyers. But that's
Yeah.
for a different day to really deep dive that part. But the risks are important. When I do a normal purchase agreement, I'm not a licensed agent. I use a normal, simple purchase agreement. It is a 2-page purchase agreement. When I do a subject to deal, I have my 2-page purchase agreement that's been modified for a subject to deal, plus 8 additional pages of disclosures of the risk of subject to both parties. That
And
is really
oh, I'm sorry.
important for us to go over with the sellers.
Yeah, and that kind of begs a question. So this is one that it seems like in a lot of the the larger groups. I'm sure you can assume which groups I'm talking about whenever I say the larger groups for the subject to strategy. There's a question that often goes kind of like taunted when somebody asks, or the common answer is buy the course. So I'm going to ask you this, and hopefully you can share the knowledge. So in this strategy, because it is risky, what happens
Yep.
in the event of a seller death or a seller bankruptcy with a sub two strategy and that mortgage?
Yeah, great question. So when it comes to the risk, truly, I could have had this whole conversation be an hour, and it's just on subject two.
Easy,
Um,
yeah,
Very, very easy. So when it comes to the risk, if a seller declares bankruptcy, if it's within 6 months of the loan, of the not the loan, the title transferring to my name, I am the most at risk. There is a potential that they could actually reverse the sale, especially if there is equity in the property. This is a
hmm
deal that didn't have a ton of equity, but there's plenty of deals that I've bought that day one I had 30, 40% equity into the deal.
yeah,
And so if they filed bankruptcy, depending on what type, there is a potential that the bankruptcy court could reverse the sale to go after the equity. It's important, so importantly, that I literally build into my due diligence that for a subject to deal. And by the way, on a normal deal, you do basically due diligence on two things. You do due diligence on the house and you do due diligence on the numbers, right?
yeah,
On a subject to deal, I do four different categories of due diligence: the house, like the condition, all that stuff; the numbers, what is it worth, what would it rent for, all of that. The third thing I do due diligence on is the loan, because I'm buying it subject to that loan. Well, you should know what you're getting into. The
yeah,
the sad day is when someone comes up to me and they say, "Hey, I'm buying this property subject to." I said, "Great, have you gone and checked out, have you researched the loan?" Well, what do you mean, Courtney? I said, "Do you know if it's, a fixed rate or an adjustable? Do you know whose all names are on the loan?" And they're like, "Well, no, the seller didn't say anything like that." No, 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 you're the professional. You're the expert, right? You should be the one leading that conversation, not the civilian. And so I do
yeah,
due diligence on the loan. And then the fourth part is I actually do due diligence on the seller. I straight up ask them, do you have any intentions of filing bankruptcy in the next 60 days to 6 months? And we have a very honest conversation about it, right?
yeah,
So in the event, ultimately, in the event someone files bankruptcy, I'm gonna um, at worst case, I've got to hire at worst case, the deal can be reversed. Any money you
mhm,
have into it could be lost. But second of all, you're gonna have to hire an attorney to have them release it from bankruptcy, the trustee court. And so that really just depends again on when it's done and what chapter of bankruptcy and so forth. Same thing with death. I have a seller that died. I have one right now. She's going through major health issues, and I'm worried about her because I mean, I bought one in January. At the closing, the seller showed up and she had a growth on her neck. Bless her heart, truly. But like
yeah,
from the time I saw her 2, 3 weeks before until the closing day, a growth appeared on her neck, like the
yeah,
size of a baseball. And she was like, they're worried it's cancer, all this stuff, right? Well, I bought that deal, and there was two people on the loan, this woman and her mom. Her mom was deceased. And so we had to sign all sorts of paperwork in regards to the subject to, in regards to her mom being deceased, but being on the loan. And now I'm worried about this woman's health, right? I have a deal where the only borrower, I bought it subject to, and the only borrower is deceased. It truly complicates the deal. Here's what's really important: the benefit of a subject to deal is that I didn't have to go qualify for this loan. Someone else did, right?
yeah,
The downfall is someone else is in bed with me on this deal, you know, and usually they don't make good financial decisions in the first place, which is why we're here, doing the deal in the first place, right? And so,
And I just real quick, I want to take a second about that because landlords and real estate investors can sometimes get a bad rap that
mhm,
we are opportunistic and we don't care about anybody, we just care about the money. What a lot of people don't realize is that the retail market is not a forgiving market. They don't care
yeah,
if what health
yeah,
issues you have, right? An investor cares about making a deal work where they can make it work. And
yeah,
I could actually hear it in your voice. You're concerned for this person, not because of your deal, but because you actually care about humans and you care about providing solutions, right? So
exactly.
for anybody that that might watch this now or in the future, if you think that all landlords are the same or all insert your word here are the same, you might want to go out there and just kind of get a reality check because it's not the case. Yes, there are bad investors, there are bad landlords, there are bad tenants, there are just bad people. However, whenever you focus on solutions and you focus on helping how you can grow a business just by providing solutions. So sorry, I had to get off on that rant.
It's huge. I'm gonna have an entire slide basically dedicated to that. I love it. It's why you and I click. But guys, when it comes to it, Brene Brown says to be clear is to be kind. If you don't understand the risk of a subject to deal, you could work yourself into a bad deal. And I get phone calls about it all the time. In 2021, we had our last big hurricane here in Southeast Louisiana and New Orleans. I had so many people calling me because they did creative deals but didn't do the paperwork right. They didn't know how to cash a check for an insurance claim or how to properly navigate it. And so all of these things are super important. Someone asked earlier about the due on sale clause. That's super important to understand. I do have concerns that those are going to happen more potentially. Um,
Yeah.
I don't fully I don't believe it's so much so that I'm not buying any subject to deals, but I am very careful with how many subject to deals I have in my portfolio at any given time. If you guys are interested, if you go to courtneyfricke.com, and then if you go to the very bottom of it's basically a link tree, but if you go at the very bottom, I did one of my best friends and a business partner of mine. I went out of the country at the end of last year, and we had bought a ton of subject twos together. And he basically, I get back in the country after 3 weeks abroad, and he goes, "I've got good news and bad news." I was like, "Oh God." And I'm thinking it's having to do with our properties. He's like, "No, I bought a subject to deal for his own portfolio while you were gone, but within the good news is this is going to be educational for you. The bad news is within 3 days of me buying it, they called it due."
Wow.
Meaning, if you look here on this deal, the 176,000 was basically he got a letter saying in 30 days that balance is due, even if there's 27 years left on the loan. So the internet touts that there's all these workarounds that you can do all these things and reverse the due on sale, and sometimes you can. I agree. But in his specific case, you 100% could not have avoided the due on sale being called, or you could not have reversed it. And so if you guys go to CourtneyFricke.com, at the very bottom, it is a two-part. They're about an hour each. He literally gave me all the paperwork from the purchase to, I helped him through a solution. And so we waited, the loan got called due. We worked the solution. And then afterwards, once the solution was finalized, I took the paperwork from that closing as well, analyzed it all. And I did a 2-hour interview with him. I broke it up into 2 different parts where we broke down the due on sale and really kind of deep dived it. And I basically wanted to find out if I would have caught this and been able to avoid it up front.
Yeah.
And I believe I would have, but at the same time, it's important. It's a great case study if you guys want to go learn from it. So go to CourtneyFricke.com at the bottom. It's due on sale call breakdown part 1 and part 2.
Well, I know I've got some projects for this week.
All right, guys, let's wrap this up, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. So, just some important principles to live by. Truly, the paperwork matters. you want to protect all parties involved. If you guys remember the 30-year where I basically had 82,000 plus interest, I gave her, it was 158,000 over 30 years. The real estate agent goes, this woman's going to sneak one up on you and buy it for 82,000 and within 6 months refinance it and cut you out of the 30 years of interest. And I said, Miss Karen, what is your response to that? And she goes, no, we already talked about that because what we agreed to, basically her 158, right? We built in there that my prepayment penalty was equal to the remaining amount of interest that I owed her. So if I ever sold it or paid her off early, I had to pay her the full, interest. Now I built in some other provisions that were protective, but for both parties. And so she understood that she was protected from that. So guys, don't build your paperwork one-sided. Number one, those rarely ever hold up in a court of law when something is so heavily one-sided. And then second of all, truly take care of the people you're doing business with. That is how my business is almost entirely referral and repeat business these days. Number two, everyone should know the risk and benefits of the deal. Not just you. It should also be the seller. That I never want my best client to be uninformed. Now, I know when to shut up and not, keep going, but I want them to know even if we have to go 30,000 foot and keep it high level, I want them to understand and to talk through those. So number three, there's lots of moving parts. I want to encourage you to become a master deal maker. There's a lot of people who are hobbyists when it comes to creative financing, and I've seen them get themselves and sellers into a world of pain because they don't know how to properly structure a deal. Maybe they don't know the actual risk and benefits, and they don't know what the paperwork needs to look like. And I've seen it hurt, multiple parties involved. And so I would encourage you that you want to continue to aim to be proficient at deal making. Honestly, I've been doing this for 10 years. I still attend 6 to 10 classes a year, workshops a year, to improve my skill sets. And you guys are doing that here tonight. So kudos to you. Fourth part is don't be structure oriented. Please don't say, hey, I learned about a cool thing called subject to tonight. Now every single seller I come across, I'm going to offer them subject to. Well, if you offered Karen, who was that first duplex, subject to, she's going to look at you weird because she's like, I don't have a loan on this for you to take subject to, right? So don't be so structured oriented that you're just, it's like you went to Home Depot and got a pretty cool tool and now you're wanting to use it everywhere. I'm like, put that weird saw up. You don't need it for this job. Like,
yeah.
So know the right tool for the right job.
Yeah.
And lastly, a lot of people say, Courtney, we're in the house business. I mean, that's true. Well, more so we're in the people business, but even more than that, I believe I'm in the business of making and keeping promises. The minute that you make a promise and you don't keep it, and right now in this market, things are very difficult. And so know that keeping your promise is key, even to your own detriment. It is key to staying in this business long-term. I'm a huge believer of that. There's a level there that you want to be careful to not go make a whole bunch of promises that you can't keep, because truly that is how the whole, empire that you built falls apart, is when you stop keeping your promises. And look, there is no greater test to that, to that model than when the market is difficult. And as the market is difficult right now, we're learning this left and right. So keep that in mind. One of my last few slides here is, how you do real estate matters. It says it on my shirt, which I'll come off sharing screen here in a second. But I wear this on my shirt all the time. This is my tagline for my business. How you do real estate matters. It's not only the technical side, which is super important, you guys. It's important to know the different tools and when one applies to help a certain seller, but it's also so important how you treat people. So it's not just the technical, but it's the relational side. And truly, there's so much business that I get, referral, repeat business, because of how I treat the people involved. If you want to connect further, when you scan this, this is my Instagram. You can follow me on Courtney Fricke on Facebook or Courtney Fricke on Instagram. If you go to CourtneyFricke.com, I have my YouTube channel that has my podcast on there, as well as those daily micro podcasts that I shared about earlier. Definitely go there. And CourtneyFricke.com has a few different resources down at the bottom, or those videos that I suggested. And for those of you who are interested, I do not look, I leave the coaching for people like Lee and them with his school group. Look, at the end of the day, I just do a few workshops a year. So in March 15th here in New Orleans, I'm doing an in-person and a virtual workshop. This is where I deep dive a topic. So maybe you've enjoyed how I taught about real estate, how I approach my deals, but I'm deep diving subject to. It's what I call my safe subject to class. There's no such thing as a safe subject to deal, 100% safe, but only how can you do them as safely as possible. This is truly an emergency masterclass because I get so many phone calls of people who, get a subject to on a contract, they don't know what they're doing, or they did one and now they're in trouble. And so this came out of response of all those phone calls. Literally, there's nothing but the ticket to the class for sale. It's in person or virtual. It's one day, March 15th in New Orleans, or virtual. In person, you get lunch and the physical manual. Y'all, my manuals are where I dump my brain. So it's going to be between 150 to maybe over 200 pages. And you also get the recordings of a 2-day workshop, mastering creative deals with agents. That's one of the biggest ways that I find deals is creative deals is with agents. And so you'll get access that has its own manual. And you'll get the recordings. It was a 2-day workshop. You get the recordings of that. You can get your ticket at fricke.com. I'm doing that one actually, Lee. I'm doing it in May in Tampa as well, with my Tampa friends. And so that's all. I do not care to pitch, but a lot of people have begged me over the years to deep dive topics. And so I really see myself as a specialist. And so these workshops are how I empty my brain. So you guys are welcome. Appreciate you guys, Lee. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you guys for giving of your night with me and sharing some of your time. And so I'm happy to join and just answer any other questions.
Yeah. First off, if my wife is still watching this, let's just forget that there's one coming up in May in Tampa. I've been looking for a reason to get out to New Orleans, and it's after Fat Tuesday, right? So
Come to Mardi Gras.
Exactly, a lot of the craziness will calm down, and New Orleans can still be enjoyed at that point.
Exactly.
Right now, it's right there before St. Patty's Day, so different type of fun. But
we have all sorts of fun down here.
Yeah, no, that would be an amazing trip to go to New Orleans. And we understand that whenever you go somewhere for education, for business, it is a business trip. It is not a vacation. Not that this is legal or tax advice. So
exactly.
With that, if I don't get to catch you there, at least we'll have to slide up to Tampa. It's only a 2.5 hour drive. So
yeah.
Wow. All right. Let's just go back and briefly try to unpack this. So, real quick, if anybody has questions or anything before we call it a night, Courtney came in here for just a quick hour, but I'm telling you, she dropped some knowledge. And, thank you for that because, sub two, and I've even since the clubhouse days, right? You were talking about how you were like really into sub two and your mentor in the space. And I went there and I didn't get to stay the whole time because I had, I wasn't feeling well and ended up leaving early. But really started to get curious about that because, lately, the prices are up and the interest rates are up, and you cannot have both at the same time and still make great deals. So getting there and finding these off market or even on market, but identifying these opportunities and taking that action will allow people to apply a low leverage point or possibly low leverage points to really build up their portfolio.
Yeah. And we really didn't even touch, I took like a little eye drop thing and like did that into the bucket, right? Like, barely. But like, for example, I just bought in January, I bought a deal. It's worth $240, $250. I bought it subject to $117,000 loan.
Wow.
And it needs 30 in work. I'm not going to do the 30 in work. I'm selling it on, I'm going to sell it on a lease option to an owner occupant. And thank you, Catherine. I appreciate that. But here's the big thing, Lee. It is a 2015 loan. The power of that. I stepped in 2025, 10 years in to that 30-year loan. Last year, I bought one that was a 2012 loan. I got to step 12 years into the future. When you get into it for a 30-year loan, when you get into around the middle, you start paying more towards principal.
Yeah.
And
When
so
that
not
old
only,
table is kind of flipped. Yeah.
exactly. And so not only do I get to manipulate interest rates and things like down payments and like the bank requirements and, all those different things, but I also get to manipulate time on certain deals like those as well. And that's huge.
Yeah. Well, is that earlier you had said there was something special about the 2020 loan. So is that kind of feeding back to the point that you just made about, you stepped 5 years into the future with that loan?
Yeah, well, exactly. And so those things are so huge. I mean, one of the things I track, so I have a spreadsheet that I track all my active properties in my, portfolio with. And one of the things I track every month is basically the principal payment. How much of that monthly payment is going to a principal basically that's paying down? If you guys remember, I bought it at 176 and today, 2 years later, it is 148, I think. Just chipping away at it because of that low interest rate. And so um I think right now, subject to wise, the lowest one I have is a 3.125. I had, I was going to buy a 2.5. We ended up not buying that one because the numbers didn't make sense. But there's plenty of those out there. The 2, 3s, 4s.
Well, I've got to say, and I don't want to take up any more of your time than you've already given us. You've already graciously run over. But if nobody has any comments, then Courtney, if you would just give us kind of your final takeaways, right? So, what would you suggest if somebody wanted to kind of start the path down this? I mean, I'm sure that anybody that's followed us by now, they know Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's going to be a book recommendation. They're going to say Richest Man in Babylon. Or, what are the populars? But what would you say would be the most impactful book that has helped you really along this journey?
So I actually have, in this is my office, but in my living room, I have 3,500 books. I'm an avid reader.
Oh, I know you are. Yeah.
And so, but I actually keep on my desk like the most impactful books.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to share two. Could you allow me that? All
Yeah.
right. Honestly, Rich Dad Poor Dad, it has its place, but I tell people all the time, throw it out. It doesn't teach you actual real estate, it teaches you financial literacy, which is great. We all need that.
Yeah.
This is my number one favorite book, and this is one of my top 3 mentors. But it's my favorite real estate book. It's called Building Wealth One House at a Time by John Schaub. This is the 3rd edition, so he's added to it over the years. John has been investing since the 1970s. He's still actively investing now. He's down in Sarasota.
Yeah. The last name Schaub, is that spelled Schaub?
Yep.
All right. I'm just going to put it into the comments in case somebody wants to look it up.
Super practical, super helpful when it comes to real estate. John's a creative finance guy, but he breaks things down super impactful. So great book. Number one real estate book that I recommend. And then the other book, which has been more of it guides me in my philosophy. It's The Go Giver by Bob Berg. And this book is small, like 100 pages, written in a story format, so easy to read. I've read this book 20 plus times.
And that's Burke, Bob Burke, Burke?
Burg.
Burg, Bob Berg. Okay.
Yeah. So The Go Giver, and it's written in a story format. It's the 5 laws of stratospheric success. It's literally the concept that if you want to make more money, you've got to help more people.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really that concept, right? You're only one connection away from changing your life.
Yeah.
And it's not about going out there finding people saying, what can you do for me? It's about how can I help you? How can I add value? So that in turn, reciprocity, and we decide that you might want to help me in return one day. And
Yeah.
I'm going to have to check those out. So I've met John very briefly whenever I was in Tampa at
Yep.
Pizza Event, but it's,
Yep.
yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back up there.
Yeah, they
All
do
right.
it. They do it in April. So if you want to come out again, I'll be out there. I'll be in Tampa like 6 times between
Oh, you'll
now and the
be,
summer.
if it's not the first week in April, then possibly. Yeah. I'm going to be tied up the first
I'll
week.
text you. Yeah, I'll text you. I'm literally there multiple times: March, April, May, June.
Okay.
I think even beyond that. So yeah,
All right. Well, Courtney, again, thank you for coming out tonight. And
yeah,
guys, as we go to wrap this down, guys, girls, everybody else, as we go to wind this down, I want you to understand that Courtney's doing one thing that a lot of people don't, and that is taking action. And she is a person of action. I've known her for the better part of 5 years now, and it has not slowed her down a bit.
yeah.
That being said, if you would like to get on and share some of the knowledge of your journey on real estate after dark, I welcome you. Just reach out, send me a DM or something like that, and we'll work to get you on the stream. We look to do this every Monday night, and sometimes it's a little later, sometimes it's earlier, but that's consistent goal. So again, Courtney, thank you for coming out tonight, spending the time, and
Yeah.
look forward to catching
Thanks
up
so
and
much.
hopefully having you on again soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
And look, let
absolutely.
me know if you can come out for Mardi Gras.
Well, I'm going to have to see what Catherine says.
The,
But
the
yeah,
city the city was just snazzed up because of the Super Bowl, so we all fancy right now. So I'm looking forward to this Mardi Gras. We kind of cleaned up. We have company coming, and so the city's looking nice.
yeah, swept the streets a little bit, right?
Just a
All
little
right,
bit.
all right. Well, that
All right.
sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and wind the stream down and stay with me real